Hello, and welcome to our second episode for the Expressive watercolor portrait. Today, I would like for you to have the following items. First, we will need the worksheet, the value pen practice page. We also need the Expressive Portrait Project lesson guide, and we will flip that open until we see the pen values page. So I'd like for you to have that open and on your non-dominant side. So you can go ahead and set it up now. You should have your paper directly in front of you, and you should have your lesson guide open to the pen value scales page and on your non-dominant side. So if you're right-handed, put it on your left. All right, now we are going to be working with a new medium we have not worked with in this class yet, and that is pen. You'll receive a block that looks like this per table, and you'll see that the lines on top indicate which sections are for which students to use the specific materials closest to them. So if you are sitting in the left corner, you would get to work with all of the pens in the left corner. So you're welcome to grab those out and set them next to yourself. Now, I would like to have us go through these pens together. So go ahead and collect this larger pen. We are just going to add a couple of lines, and we're going to write chisel. This is a chisel tip Sharpie, and as you can see, you can do a thin line or a thick line. So try that out as well. We're moving down in size to the fine point Sharpie. Go ahead and grab this out. We are going to practice it, draw a couple of lines. We're just going to write Sharpie. And we can add what the line thickness looks like underneath. Go ahead and cap that. Let's switch to our V5. That's this black pen, and it's got like the little silver side clip to it. It's called a V5 Pilot. So we're gonna open that little buddy up, draw a couple lines. You can feel the difference here. We're gonna label this one V5. Draw yourself a couple of lines for reference to see the thickness. Go ahead and cap that pen. And let's try the ballpoint. These are just like those cheapy little pens that you accidentally steal from the bank. They are everywhere because they're so inexpensive, but they're actually one of my favorite pens to work with for shading. So let's write ballpoint. So as you can see, we worked in order of thickness of the point for our pens as we were checking them all out. Now we are going to begin by practicing on our value scales. Value scales are similar to learning like the basic notes in a new instrument. When you're first learning how to play, you have to learn how to play the notes. So shading and value scales are equivalent to that in this class. Now what we're going to do, and this is going to be a follow along style. So that means I am going to be talking the class through it, and if at any point you realize that you need more time, you are absolutely welcome to hop off and branch out on your own and to pull up this exact demonstration video from the unit website so that you can play this at your own pace and you can follow along with earbuds so that you can pause it when it's starting a part where you're not quite ready. So if at any point you feel a little behind, you can pause this and just hop right into the video on your own. Now, we are going to begin with our value scales. Like I said, let's go ahead and all of us grab our fine point Sharpie. We're going to begin by first talking about how we're going to go from dark to medium to light with pen, because with a pen, it's different than something like a pencil or a colored pencil where I can adjust my pressure with my hand, so I can press really hard and make it look darker, and then I could press lighter and get a medium, and even lighter, and I make it as light as I can with a colored pencil. That does not work with a pen. So we are adjusting our technique and we are adjusting our pen size to help us change the value. Now, we are going to begin with our Sharpie. We don't use the chisel very much in this unit because it's a much larger pen, and we usually save larger pens for when we're filling in really large spaces. So most of our practice is going to be done with our Sharpie. So we're going to begin with our Sharpie. Go ahead and grab that out. And we are going to give ourselves some value scale sections so that we know where to add our pen. Now I'm going to come through and I'm going to count 3 boxes out from the left. So 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to draw a line going all the way through this space, and I'm going to go all the way down to the very bottom value scale. Now at this point, I'll just start to zoom in a bit so that you can see specifically what I'm doing. You can check out your lesson guide for information and reminders as we work through, but I'm going to go ahead and make it so you just see this. Now let's go ahead and do that again. We're going to do that 3 boxes over one more time. So let's draw a line that is dividing those sections out for us. All right, now we are going to go through, and for each of these value scales, we begin in the same way by filling in the first value in the style or the direction that your technique is asking for. So for hatching, we are going to fill in this first box, and you can do this with me now, and we're filling it with lines that are going up and down, but we want to fill it completely solidly. Go ahead and do that now. All right, next, let's go ahead and fill in the first box for cross hatching. So cross hatching starts in the same way. I'm just going to add some lines. It's okay if it kind of goes outside of the lines a smidge here. And I'm going to go the opposite direction, so vertical and horizontal lines. And I'm just doing that to fill in the texture. And although you don't notice much of a difference between these two, the remaining ones will have a little bit of a change in texture. Now let's go ahead and fill in the first box for the scribbling texture, and we're going to do that by making a bunch of little circles, little scribble lines, and filling it in. And we're going to do that same thing for stippling. So let's go ahead and fill in these first boxes together. You can give yourself a border so that you don't go outside of the lines if that makes it easier for yourself. And that is the first step for all of our value scales. Now let's head back up to hatching, and we're going to go all the way through this value scale and then continue to the next one. Something you should know is that the lines are where we know when to change our pens. So that means I'm only going to use Sharpie for 2 more boxes. Now for our hatching, we are doing straight up and down lines. So I'd like for you to watch for this part, and then you're going to try it. So eyes up on the board. For this next section, we are going to come in and we're leaving skinny little white lines left behind. And we want to be kind of precise here so that we can make sure we're not leaving too much white. Now, as we continue into this next one, I'm going to leave just a smidge bit bigger sizes of white stripes. So see how it's slowly increasing the amount of white that is visible. Now we're going to cap our Sharpie. Do that with me. Now we're going to switch to the next size, which is V5. So we're going to come in with our V5, and I'm going to put these lines very close together in this next one. So go ahead and put these lines very close together, and just skinny little white spaces. Now you'll notice that that sort of looks darker than the one that we had just finished with. So I'm going to add a skinny little line in some of these open spaces in this back section. So I'm just adding a couple little skinny lines there to tie it together. So now one thing that you can do, a little trick that I have, is I like to put my eyelashes directly in front of my eyeballs. And it sounds kind of weird, but I'll like look through my eyelashes, and because I'm blurring my vision, it allows me to see if the values are in order or not. So if you look and you can see that this box is darker, that means that you should go add more lines to the first 3 boxes with your V5. So squint your eyes, see if it's flowing in value, and now we're going to continue with our V5. So what we're going to do now is we're spacing out these lines even more, and I'm going to add even more space to this next one. So we have them pretty close together, In this middle one, I might add just a few more, and then really spaced out. Now I'm gonna cap my pen. Now we're gonna come in with our next pen, which is ballpoint. So everyone go ahead and grab your ballpoint pen. We are going to go back into these last two sections, and we're just adding some thin, very light pressure. So you can change the pressure of ballpoint pen lines to be very light or to be very dark. And we want these lines to be quite light as we go through and just add a little bit of ballpoint pen value into our previous squares here. Now I'm going to come in and I'm using my pressure for these last two to slowly adjust the pressure of my pen, not necessarily making it like void of lines. We still need lines visible. They just can be lighter when we're drawing them. So I am going through and now I'm adjusting, and I'm just kind of like filling very lightly with my ballpoint pen over the top of my entire value scale. And I'm looking for any open spaces that are needing a bit of filling, or if there are like some white lines that are really bright, I might just come in and tone those down a little. So we're gonna practice that little technique where you squint your eyes and cover your eyelashes over your eyes just a little so that we can see where we need to do our perfecting. And that's what we're working on right now, is perfecting. So put your eyelashes over your eyes. I know it feels sort of silly at first, but I promise you it's worth it once you figure it out. So we're just checking and filling in. Make sure that you went all the way to the edge, like the outside section of your value scale, and if not, you can fill up against the edge. All right, and there is hatching. So next we are going to come in for cross hatching. We're gonna cap our ballpoint pen, and we're gonna come in with our Sharpie on our first section. So this first section is all Sharpie. We are going to begin by spacing out these lines more than we think we're gonna need, because watch what happens when we come in for our second layer. So eyes up here, take a look and watch how much darker this second layer makes this. So you can even kind of check the value by squinting at mine up on the board. And now watch the change in value, even just for this bottom half. Look how much darker the value gets by adding that second layer. So we need to accommodate for the fact that the second layer makes everything much darker by going in way lighter than we think we'll need, and then coming in for the second layer, and that combination is how we're changing the value. So the layer that's light plus another light layer makes the value that we're looking for. Now we're gonna cap our Sharpie. You are good to go ahead and try those diagonal lines. We're just connecting corners, or you could go up and across. Those lines are fine as well, just as long as they're going opposite directions. All right, now we're gonna pick up our V5 pen, and we're gonna bring it back into this first section to tie it in a little. So I'm gonna add just a V5 line between all of my other lines, just to help it kind of tie in that size of line as we continue. Next, I'm going to just go right next to this space, and I'm making these lines really close together because the line size is much smaller for this pen, so it's automatically gonna make it lighter. So I'm making these lines very close together, and then I'm making my second layer overlap, and see how much darker that second layer made this bottom section. So we are coming in and adding that second layer, which drastically darkens. All right, next we are going to do that same step, but we're gonna space out our first layer lines even more. And then even more for our next one. And remember, it's okay if it looks like it's a little bit too big, because we can cap this and come in with our ballpoint to do some perfecting. Now, I am gonna come in with my ballpoint and just add like a light layer of light value lines so that it has the same amount of lines and texture, but the value is lighter than what came before. So I'm just coming in with really light lines now. And now I'm going to switch entirely to ballpoint pen. And I'm just adding a little bit more white space. And then for this last one, I'm barely even touching, just grazing the paper very, very lightly. And there is our last section. Now we are in the perfecting phase. So I'm going to put my eyelashes over my eyelids, and I'm gonna go through and look for any spots that have big, wide open, like spots that need filling. And I'm looking to make sure that my values transition smoothly from one to another. So I'm just using my eyelashes to blur my vision, essentially, so that I can tell where I need to go back through and continue improving. Now I am darkening up my darks and mediums, coming through with just another little layer of texture with my ballpoint pen only. And we only do perfecting with ballpoint. This allows us to not change the value too much, even though we are adding a whole nother layer. All right, next up is scribble. So we are going to cap ballpoint, and what do we begin with? Sharpie. That's right. Go ahead and grab your Sharpie, and we are going to be making a scribble like this, but what I'm going to be talking about are the little open spots inside of each circle, and I like to refer to those as the donut holes. So what we're talking about is making sure you don't miss those little white spots inside of the circles you're making, inside of the scribbles. Now we're gonna make a really tiny little scribble here with our Sharpie, and we're trying to leave the tiniest little amounts of white that's nice and even all throughout that first box. Now I'm going to increase the size of my scribbles so that I have more white showing. We want it to be as even of texture as possible. Go ahead and do that with me. All right, we're gonna cap that Sharpie. Next, we're going to work with our V5, and we're gonna come back through just to connect it with a skinnier line. I'm using the skinny little V5 line to add a little bit into that third box here to tie it together. And then I'm gonna use just the V5 scribble, really tightly condensed, so really close together marks for that first V5. And then I'm slowly spacing out my marks even more so that I've got more white space showing. Go ahead and do this with me. And I'm using very light pressure. In fact, I'm not even finishing making a full circle. It's almost like a little C shape. It's like a half of a circle or a portion of it, not a full circle. And then for our last one with the V5, we're just making larger spaces, just partial circles. We don't need the full thing. And we can always come back in with our ballpoint to perfect. All right. And here we go. Okay, so I'm gonna cap my V5 and let's switch to ballpoint together. We're going to uncap ballpoint, and we are going back through to perfect. So I'm using my ballpoint to perfect these values so that I don't have a random like dark, then light, then dark again fade in my value scales. We want it to go dark, medium, light. I might even bring my ballpoint back to the beginning Sharpie section just to kind of help myself mellow out those white spots. And I'm gonna just go through and I'm lightening up everything in this last section. I'm just adding a very light dusting of scribbles here. And then I'm going to go into my last two sections, and I'm using my ballpoint to make scribbles just so lightly. And this first one, filling it up all the way, And this last one, just leaving some impartial scribble marks. So not adding too much here. Now I'm gonna squint my eyes. Let's put eyelashes over our eyes here and check to make sure that we've got a nice transition between our values. And like I said at the beginning, if you do need any more time, don't feel rushed that you need to try to keep up with this pace. You can always branch out on your own and work at the pace that's best for you. If you are ready, let's go ahead and move into stippling. And I have this one immediately after scribble because it is very similar in the way that we're going to complete it because we are cheating. I don't love stipple where you have to like I call it rapid fire when you're like making a whole bunch. And sometimes when you're lifting really high up, you get this little like Nike swoosh tail dealio that's going on. So we're gonna talk a lot about the correct way to make these dots. But to begin, let's cheat and make it even easier for ourselves. We are going to start with the exact same method of filling in little circular scribbles. The tinier the little circles you make, the more realistic it will seem that this is actually done with dots. So we're making it seem like we took the amount of time it would take to fill this in by but really, we just added scribbles. Now let's increase the size of our scribbles, but maybe not make like solid lines. We're mostly just making like little random marks. Not leaving too much white space. And at this point, I'll even start adding a couple like actual dots from my Sharpie to make it look like I filled it. And let's cap our Sharpie. Switch to our V5. Now we are going to continue making little itty bitty scribbles. Like look at the size of these. They are much smaller than the ones that we have been making. So I am almost just like barely making these scribbles. They almost are just dots. And then I'm gonna go through and I have my hand resting on the table and I'm lifting and lowering very quickly rather than this number. First of all, that is breaking this pen. If I hear that sound, I'm gonna come and ask you to please stop because that is going to break this pen, which you'll be in charge of replacing. Now, what I want you to notice as well is that that gives you a line at the end, a little tail. So instead, you're setting your hand down and barely lifting the pen up because it goes so much faster that way too, that you don't have to like wait for the up and the down of like the motion of your hand to make those dots. It just goes so much faster if you are resting on the side here. So this is where it does start to get a little bit harder compared to some of the other value techniques, just because it takes a little bit more time to fill this nice and evenly with dots. But this is our first one that we do actually need the dots for, so it's really only a smidge harder than the others. But we're gonna go through and notice how long this has taken me. Like I've been talking this whole time trying to fill in all these dots, and I'm just very quickly lifting and lowering my pen while my hand is resting on the table to make that go faster. And I'm looking for any larger white areas that I can just add a couple dots through. Now I am gonna go back and make sure I didn't go darker than my original right here. So I'm just adding another little layer. And then I'm going to slowly start spacing these dots out in the next one. So again, I'm just lifting and lowering. We want to avoid the tails, so be a little careful with that, pay attention. And then I am not even going to switch to the ballpoint because I want to keep the dot size to be consistent, and the ballpoint pen gets a little too light for that. So I am just gonna come in and add some dots that are farther apart. And then for this last one, I'm just gonna add a few little random guys just fading out. All right, now let's go in and perfect. Ooh, and I've got a big difference between these two values. So I want you to check this with me. So squint your eyes up at the board and notice the difference between this value and this value. They're too far apart. So I am gonna go back through And I'm gonna just add another little layer of dots to help bridge that gap so that they have a smoother transition from one to the other. I also need to go back in and adjust for the next one since I adjusted one further in. So I'm just going back through, adding a little bit more. So this is our perfecting layer, just going through and adjusting anything to help make this a smoother fade, the smoothest we can. All right, well, thank you so much for watching, and as I see you for our next episode, we are going to be practicing shading in the sphere. If you had any questions on our first value scales, you should definitely ask and get them figured out before you move on, because these are the foundational skills you need to be able to continue shading in the next steps correctly. All right, thank you so much for watching.